I've come in and seen people in home services were like, yeah, I'm charging, $60 an hour. And I'm like,
yeah, that's way too low, everybody.
1993.
Jared Williams, welcome to your podcast. It's so great to have you here.
Yep. Yeah. So we just filmed a podcast with Tyler Williams, and we were talking afterwards, and we were having some good talks. So I was like, actually, I think you were like,
Joel,
do you guys just want to film another one?
I mean, because so many of my conversations revolve around marketing.
Yeah.
The more marketing conversations I think we can have, because I do think it is the space where the plumbing business owner is the weakest, conceptually and in practice. So the more conversations we can have like this, I think it's just the better for everybody, myself included.
Definitely. So
everybody needs marketing conversations.
Yeah, I think
so they really do.
And so I had brought up the fact that I think that marketers tend to be a little gun shy when telling people to hire their services. I think they're on two spectrums. They're like either making way too many promises over here, like they're going to just kill it for this client and all this stuff, and like typical sales. But then I think on the other end, you have marketers who, are like, you don't have any money. You're going to put this on a credit card. There's no way I'm going to let you do that. And I think it goes further than that, because even if you did sell them a package, I think a lot of times they'll go, okay, and I don't know if you do this, but maybe you can touch on that. But I've heard people go, okay, well, you need X amount of calls, so then let's work this backwards and let's spend the minimum amount to get the amount of calls that you need. And I think of marketing totally different, right? Because I'm like, dude, okay, so you're telling me if I want 30 calls, I can possibly get those I'm just throwing the numbers out there. I can possibly get those calls for $5,000. Well, to me, I'm like, why wouldn't I try and spend $10,000 and see if I can get 60 calls?
So I think that brings up the philosophy and I think this is part of like where people are at. If you spend it 1 month and you get your 30, you should have a margin that would then grow. So that way you could spend to get your 35 and then 40 and then 50, right? But I mean, I guess there's the question of capacity, right? If 30 is not what you actually have the capacity to serve, then maybe you are under marketing, right? So,
man, I think if I was able to do 30 calls, right, and I could spend, and I put $10,000 in my budget to get those 30 calls for the month. These numbers are like way not accurate at all, but whatever. We're going to keep going with them. So
it's an example.
30 calls, $5,000, right? Me personally, I'd say I'm going to spend $10,000 to see if I can get 60 calls. And I would go back to my budgeting, back to my pricing calculator. If you guys don't have a pricing calculator, I'll put a link to one in the comments down below. And you can get it for free, okay? Where you can go put in money for your marketing budget and see how that affects your hourly rate and so on and so on and so on, okay? Which is how you should do it, right? So if I go put $10,000 in my hourly rate calculator and it calculates I got to charge another $2, $3 an hour to make up for that marketing budget, and I go see if I can get 60 calls, it doesn't, as long as I'm billing my hourly rate, the marketing is going to pay for itself.
Yes.
And here's here's my thing. It's not like you're spending $10,000 and then going, okay, let's get 60 calls coming in. You're giving Google money daily for calls. So you might give Google, maybe it's every couple of days, you might give Google $500 and they got you a few calls. But then you're going to go serve those calls and you're going to make your money back. You're going to make that $500 back plus some, as long as you're priced properly. So in my mind, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, and this is where is where I differ from most people and most marketers, but it's worked very well for me. I'm like, okay, as long as I'm accounting for it in my marketing budget, I'll pay whatever for marketing. And I know I'm so confident that it works that I would be willing to put that on my credit card at the beginning of my business.
So I think there's two factors at play. And if I can remember both of them by the time I get to the second one, I'll be surprised.
Okay.
But the first one is you started investing into your marketing once the system was mature enough to be able to handle it. Marketing takes optimization. What
Yep.
you launch today is going to be very different in 3 months, 6 months, and a year down the road.
Yeah.
And so you have to get that data back.
Yep.
Now, so I wouldn't recommend that somebody drops 10 grand like on
Month
like their
one.
first month of service, right?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
you want to make sure that the model works. And that's where people start going like, is it working? But once you do get it proven out, then barring changes in the market, like new competition and things like that, the math should work.
Yes.
So here's the second thing that I think you have in your pocket is the mentality of raising my prices doesn't hurt my business.
Right.
That's one of the, like, you have a fluctuating pricing model based on what the market is. And a lot of people will sit down and they'll work out their pricing and they'll never reevaluate.
Right.
And then they'll go like, well, we can't pay for the marketing. It's like, but it's customer acquisition. You don't have a business without marketing.
And
Like,
here's
like a real business.
Here's the thing with that, Tyler, is that every other plumbing business in your area has the same marketing costs, right?
Yes.
If they want to match the level of marketing that you do, then they have to spend the same amount.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's some tweaks you can do to make that better, like a good-looking brand, all of that kind of stuff. But
yeah, once you get everything on step,
aside from all that, just dollar for dollar, they're going to have to spend the same amount as you. So they're going to have to go, and if they want to stay in business, they're going to have to go charge the customer more to be able to pay for their marketing, right?
And that's where I think you understood that the price affected the service, affected the acquisition. Like it was all related. And that's another thing. I think a lot of people they get scared about pricing.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm glad you got a pricing calculator.
But so why not go just blow everybody out of the water in your area with marketing and just include to do that in your hourly rate and make the customer pay for that?
A lot of people don't have the capital, so they build up to it. Right.
But that's the other thing I don't understand. Cause like, I mean, so like typical AdWords campaign, like if you had a new client come on, we're talking new clients need, 90 days to optimize their AdWords campaign.
Yep.
And if you know it works, why not spend more?
So
just keep going.
I've had these conversations with clients who, like, we had one client who would spend $175,000 a year on traditional, like cable TV. And then they got it in their head that digital was cheap. And so they cut their budget way back and switched over to digital, and digital was cheap. But then they never matured their spend again. And then they ended up losing market share, and things got tighter and tighter and tighter. And they kept having to make different decisions that ended up hurting them in the long run. And they were never as sure. They never reached like the brand awareness. So it ended up hurting their business. Right.
Right.
Okay. So, but I think the thing is you have to build the model. You got to spend money on it to prove it. Right.
Yep.
And that education and that optimization is necessary. Now, if you have it, the one thing that can happen is your market changes in the flow. A competitor suddenly goes, I'm willing to pay more. And the cost goes up. And another one goes in. And then another one goes in. So because it's so immediately volatile, like you have to be watching it carefully. But I mean, you and I woke up one day and it was like, calls seem slow.
Yeah.
And then we went in and changed bid adjustments and dumped more money in the campaign, and calls came back, which told me that somebody else entered the market.
And then calls got more expensive.
And then they got more expensive. And guess what? And I think what you did is you just went back to your pricing calculator, didn't you? And just adjusted for it. Yeah. Because you are right. Like if you can't make the business go at what your cost of marketing is, the business just doesn't work. It's a formula.
You're not charging enough. Yeah.
And I do run across that. Like I've come in and seen people in home services who are like, yeah, I'm charging, $60 an hour. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's way too low, everybody.
1993.
Yeah.
So,
Like you need to be, I don't know a single well-run plumbing business that's not over, nobody's under 400. They're at least 400.
I've talked to companies that are under that.
Yes. Well,
And
I have too, but they're not
yeah.
successful.
Exactly. They're like
that's why.
just barely staying alive.
True.
And the, I mean, part of it is you have to price for growth.
Yep.
Like otherwise you'll just constantly chasing your own tail. Like it doesn't matter how well the marketing works if you don't have your pricing right. You're just
exactly.
barely making it.
and that's where I'm at. And that's where my whole thing is. If the model is right, you could potentially spend as much money as you needed to acquire a customer.
Yes. Like it just, my word of caution is make sure that the model is working for it. And that means
correct.
Making sure that you have your attribution down for that platform.
Yes.
But also realize that that platform isn't the only thing that's giving you calls.
Yeah. So you should do them all.
Yes. But yeah. In our reporting, like we're revamping it now, but it goes, here's your total leads. Here's your estimated revenue. Unless like, well, might be able to get on Service Titan soon with our reporting dashboards. But, and then we break it down by platform. These are the platforms that cost you money. This is your cost per lead on each one. So then we can go, well, if that's your cost per lead and you need 10 leads, what if, and it'll bring you this much. Well, now we kind of have a better understanding of the ROI, return on investment, right? Or ad spend. And so then the formula starts working. But I still find some people don't want to invest, even if we like prove it in a spreadsheet.
Which is just, I don't understand that. Marketing is literally the thing that makes your business go round. Without the marketing, you don't have a customer. Without a customer, you could have the coolest plumbing business in the world, but without the customer, you got nothing. You got nobody to pay you any money. So you were going to go downhill quick.
So I've found that people get scared of the number as it goes up, right? When you started out, you never thought that your marketing costs would be what they are.
No.
And to be honest, neither did I. But we didn't have a somebody who wanted to control the market like you did.
Right.
And to control the market, we figured out what it costs. You priced accordingly, and that allows you to do good service, have the team that you have, and the word on the street, if you look at your Google reviews, is good. And everybody I talk to anecdotally is like, man, your brother's company has really got it figured out.
What's funny is word on the street is, damn, those guys are expensive. Like everybody knows it. There's no doubt Prospector is expensive. But then the second somebody says that, they go, but they do good work. They take care of their customers. Like they are a good company to deal with.
I have had people come to me and be like, well, man, I would have called them, but they're so expensive. And then they call someone else who's just a man in a van with like all the papers up on the dashboard. He's got like his notepad for his invoices and whatnot. And so they're like, well, he said he'd be here at 10 and it's like 2 and I'd be like, and then he doesn't even show up and all that stuff. And it's like, yeah, well, he's cheap, but you, the customer, are going to pay for cheap.
Yeah.
Yep. Can you guys like maybe provide like a roadmap to help these plumbing business owners get from where they are, where they might not understand pricing and they don't understand marketing, because there is like this mental paralysis that's happening, because I have these conversations too, right? Where it's just like, oh, I got to spend this much. I got a conversation a couple of weeks ago where this guy was like, wow, that is incredible. I never knew that this would be this expensive, but it just seems like there's this mental block. I don't know if you guys can speak to or provide a roadmap to helping overcome that mental block.
I think there are 2 tools that will help out a lot. One is Jared's pricing calculator. And on one of my YouTube videos, there's a marketing calculator. And I just like posted it the other day. It's got a link to it in the description somewhere. I can send it to you guys if you want. But,
send me the link. We'll put it in the description down below.
Yeah. But I built it because people were saying, to ask them, okay, how many calls do you want to get a day? And do all the math. And then I go look up, okay, well, if we were going to pay an average of this much for these clicks, and then your conversion rates is blah, 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 and get it all the way down. It's like, oh yeah, okay, you're going to have to spend $40,000 on marketing a month in order to make this. And I remember one guy going like, I don't see how that's possible. And I'm like, well, someone's doing it. Otherwise these clicks wouldn't be this expensive.
Sure, right, sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So as far as the path, start it like for like you need to, there's a place where you can get some data, which is, it's hard if people don't understand the back end of this stuff, but you can pull how much keywords cost in your market. That gives you a rough idea of how to calculate like clicks and things. But
honestly, like for plumbers, just know marketing is expensive.
Yeah.
And you have to incorporate it in the cost of your service. And this is only if you want to grow like a self-sustaining plumbing business, like a real business that you don't actually work in. Like if you want to get out of being in the truck and constantly working in your business, the only way out is to actually put real marketing in place. Like real pricing structure, real customer service structure, and real marketing.
Well, and that's where I think you start with where you want to go. You use Jared's calculator to get some semblance of, okay, this is what it'll be. Then you use mine to figure out what your marketing spend needs to be. And that's a start, but it's never going to be exact. And you should constantly go back to those references and tweak and adjust. That's the other thing, is like people don't understand that marketing is not a shoe-in for customers. Like it's a series of experiments that you run and you lean into it when it works. And then it takes optimizations to get it to work better. And so you kind of have to build the road under you no matter what you do. For us, it's for every client, right? And granted, we've got best practices and stuff, but there's always like every market's different. Geography, where you are, competition, all that play.
And when you talk about that, you're talking mainly like pay-per-click and GLSA and those kinds of acquisition types?
Like on brand building, like let's say like YouTube ads, Facebook ads, Google display, those costs are a lot less volatile. Like, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that people don't like enter and leave the market quite so reactively.
Right.
Which is also a problem with Google ads. People get really like, the stats today are X, Y, or Z. And you really want to like look at the month in aggregate before you make big swings.
Right.
But with like those platforms, this is the crazy thing. I was looking at Facebook and it was like, oh, you can pay $7.80 to serve your ad 1,000 more times. And people don't realize that, like the power of that. And
yeah.
Like, and then they're like, well, I just can't afford it, so I'm just going to do my Facebook posts without ever spending money on them. And it's like the scale is just astronomical once you start spending money on things. So
it seems to me that what I'm hearing is that there is data that needs to be interpreted as you run your business, and not just off of your gut feeling or whatever, because this conversation is revolving around two spreadsheets mostly, where you price yourself out on a spreadsheet, which is all data driven. And then you look at data from marketing analytics, and then you can incorporate that price and get a rough idea. And so if we're running our businesses based off of numbers and concrete realities, then we know that what we're going to do is going to work at least to some fashion. It's when we run our businesses out of intuition and emotion and fear that we say, well, I don't want to spend this because I don't know how I'm going to recoup the cost and all these things. Because the data says, well, you recoup the cost by rolling it into your price. And that's just paying for the service. And then you really get all your money back, and more so when you actually do a couple jobs.
You kind of need to put numbers in and then work the model and then tweak your numbers on the back end.
Yeah.
Yes. It does seem like something that also it's like it's not like a set it and forget it, right? It's not like you just put it in, and this goes with pricing and this goes with marketing, where you don't just put it in and then you go and do your work and you come back 6 months later. Like Jared, I know you are always paying attention to your hourly rate and your metrics and your P&L, because why wouldn't you? And like, to be of the mindset of like being able to adjust your price when you need to, I think is really important. Like the plumbing business owners that I talk to, I always bring in price as a conversation because it helps me anchor the conversation into something. So I know where they're at, right? If they're like, oh, I never touch my price, and I'm like, ooh, this is going to be a more difficult sell. I kind of have to, kind of like convince this guy of a couple ideas before we even talk about marketing. But if you're comfortable in like looking at your price and adjusting it when you need as needed, then it's like, it's just it makes sense. I don't know why you wouldn't do it any other way, which is why I think we're sort of confused sometimes in these conversations.
I think
it's your business.
I think you bring up a good point about the psychology side of it, because that's new to people. And people are trained automatically to, just by nature of our society, to like try and get things as cheap as possible. So they automatically assume that business should be run as cheap as possible. But then that hamstrings the business, right? Yep. And instead of it being, it's scarcity, abundance, all that sort of mindset stuff. But like Jared, I remember when you first started truly tweaking your hourly rate, you were, I mean, now you do it and you're like, well, it is what it is. I just got to do it. But the first few times, it was a harder decision.
Oh yeah. Like it took me like a good year to figure out, or to really come to grips with, okay, it just costs me this much to run my business, and that's just a fact, which means I have to charge this much if I want to make a profit. And really what it came down to, which is funny, and I tell my clients this all the time, it's like, it took me a year to come down to the fact, like, I was a year in, I'd been charging more than everybody in town, running a better business. And then at the end of the day, a year in, I pull my numbers and I'm like, I'm not making any money. There's no profit left over. And so I had just put in an entire year's worth of work for nothing. And I was like, you know what? Screw this. Like, that was a lot of work for nothing.
Yeah.
And I went back to my hourly rate and I was like, okay, I have to sit down and I have to be 100% honest with myself when I'm filling this calculator out. I went back through, I made sure all of my expenses in there. I made sure I had plenty of money in marketing. I made sure I had plenty of money in the owner's compensation category. And I had to raise my price like almost $200 an hour. And I was already the most expensive one in town. And I was already getting people complaining about how expensive we are.
But you still got customers.
I still got customers. And you know what's funny? So just to give the numbers out there, we went from like 314 to, I think we went over 5. I think we were at a 549, I think, at that time, like in one jump. It was a big jump, right? In one, like literally work ended. I went home, I adjusted prices. Work started the next day at $540 some, right? I didn't tell the guys, I didn't tell a soul. And we still had plenty of work because we still had the marketing. We were actually able to dump more money into marketing and get more work.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, we had money left over and the business was making money. And that was like, thank God. Like this is it's so much better to make money at the end of the day.
Is there like a target margin you try and go for when calculating all that stuff out for profit margin?
Yeah, I always shoot for 30%.
Yeah. Okay.
Just so that I can make sure and maintain my 20% at the end of the year. And I think, last year, I think we hit just over 20% margins. This year, I think we're going to do a lot better because like January, we had 37% margins. February, we had 25% margins. We're just getting more efficient. And honestly, I raised my rate again. Like I'm not afraid to do it anymore. I'm like, you know what? I'll suck this thing as dry as I can. Like suck as much money out as you can. That's the point of the business.
I think that also you kind of have to because the market has gotten more expensive too.
Yeah.
So it just kind of is what it is. And
so my point with telling everybody that is that, the sooner you can come to that realization that I came to, that exact same spot that took me a year to do, a year of a ton of hard work and no money at the end of the year. If you can come to that realization like at the beginning or a month in or 2 months in and just go, you know what? It cost me this much to run my business. If I want to make a profit, I've got to charge this much. It is what it is. And just own it and know that you're going to go work your ass off for like 2 to 3 years to get your business up and running. And that if you're going to make money, you have to charge that rate.
Here's an interesting question. Do you think that owners have a hard time when they're starting out paying more for something than they would pay themselves in a business?
What do you mean by that? Clarify that.
So when business is starting out, a lot of times I found that people like they go, I want to pull this much. And then they think that if they if they have a down month, rather than getting aggressive to be able to pull that month, they cut back in order to hoard that month, right?
What do you mean by pull? What do you mean by pull this much?
Okay, so inside of marketing spends, like if somebody has a bad month, I've seen multiple times and had to counsel against it, where they go, oh, okay, geez, this month wasn't great. We've got to cut our marketing down.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, right. And what they're doing is they're trying to take what they made with the marketing they spent before and hold on to it. And not put it back into the market to bring more back. And so it never levels up.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. But yeah, I think there's two things there. Did you finish what you're saying?
Well, the other thing is I think very early business owners just don't know how much things cost.
True. I agree.
And when they start going like, I'm going to make this much, the business does this much, I got to pay this much for things. Sometimes they don't. I think a lot of people don't realize how much marketing can cost once you get on step.
Yes, I agree. Okay, so I got 3 things then.
Okay.
So on that last note, like think about if your business if you may do $5 million in revenue and you don't figure your costs and you don't charge appropriately and you make a 5% profit margin at the end of the day, right? Great, you made $250,000. Like that's a pretty good income. But you had to spend $4.75 million to make $250,000. So that's one way to think about it. I would much rather spend $4 million and make $1 million at a 20% profit. So you can do way less work, way less headache, way less infrastructure. The whole business is simpler. You can spend less on marketing because you actually don't need as many customers because you're charging more. You can do 5 million in revenue with less and make way more profit just by charging more.
Well, and that brings up like, if you charge too little, you have to make up for it in volume. That hurts the quality of service because you're constantly chasing the next hour sold.
And then you have to pay more for marketing because you need more volume.
Oh yeah.
So it actually doesn't really work out.
It's true.
Yeah. So
it's easy to see how people end up in these whirlwinds of just like, I can't get ahead.
Yeah.
And then they quit business, which is actually, it's sad.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. So second thing is, if you turn off your marketing because you had a bad month, how on earth is that going to make the next month any better? How is turning off your marketing the one thing that gets you call volume? How is that going to increase call volume the next month? If anything, if you had a bad month, you should be going back and going, oh crap, I don't have enough call volume. Where can I spend more on marketing? So I would go to my marketing company and I would go, hey, can we spend like on the things we're doing? Can we spend more?
Yep.
And if they said no, if they said yes, I'd be like, let's spend some more. And I go back to my calculator and I'd put it in my budget and I'd raise my prices and life would be good. If they said no, I'd say, what other types of marketing can we be doing? Can we add some other types of marketing on? Is there any low-hanging fruit we can go after? What can we do to get more calls?
To me, that mentality is what separates like in my client roster. You can see that mentality play itself out.
Yeah.
And over the years, like, 20 years of working with businesses, you go, oh yeah, remember that client who was just trying to cut their costs on everything and doing everything as cheap as possible and trying to do everyone else a favor except for themselves? Like,
Now they're out of business.
Yeah, those businesses aren't around anymore.
Yeah.
And they're
It's
just
true.
hurting.
It is.
And so, but the ones who do what you said have the mentality of like, oh, okay, I just need to invest more back into it.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, maybe I'll take a little bit less home of this profit chunk this month, but I'll at least build the business more over the next month. Like those guys you can tell, like, it affects everything in their business and ultimately their lives. Like they're in a different headspace, which is great.
Yeah. And then
what about the client who doesn't have any money, where they had a down month and they don't have any more money to reinvest? And this could be for a number of reasons, right? They could not have any money because probably their pricing's off and everything, but they're just like, I don't have any more to spend. Like, what's the advice to that client?
figure out your pricing, put it on a credit card. I mean, that's what I would do. Like, especially if I had a couple employees, guys, I would be, I mean, first of all, I would be freaking out, right?
Yes.
I would commit myself until I die to figure out how to make that thing work. And I say that because I have clients that don't have that mentality and they don't win at the end of the day. And if you have that mentality of like, I am going to do whatever it takes to fix this problem and figure out a resolution, you're going to go fix the problem and figure out a resolution. So,
So
if you have that attitude, I would go back to my hourly rate and I would say, I got to make sure I'm charging enough. And once I was confident that I was charging enough, then I would go put that marketing budget with the counsel of a marketing company. I would put that on a credit card any day of the week.
So if you've run out of money, it means that your marketing might be broken and you need to reevaluate what's happening there. Or your pricing is broken. Like your business model is broken. The two are so interconnected. You have to have a good business model for the marketing to work.
Yeah.
So now let's say both were broken and you're just like stuck. I would take every single person every person that you've serviced before. I would hop on the phone.
Yeah.
And
go back
start being
you're
like,
basically you're going back to square one. Like instead of going on Facebook and being friends with all your mom's friends, you're just calling up. You're just outbound dialing.
So and it's the thing is, like, when you spend money on marketing, all it is it's your business reaching out for you without the manual labor.
Right.
Like you can always, if you have no work, you have time, which means you can reinvest that time into the manual labor of building up your customers.
Yep.
And so I would also call every plumbing company and be like, hey, listen, guys, if you have any extra jobs, any people you don't want to service, why don't you, I would happy to be a referral. I'll give you a cut, whatever, like something to get jobs in the door, because because every job that you do, if you do it well, lifetime value of the customer skyrockets.
Yeah.
And you're building that hamster wheel.
You'll find that a lot of plumbing companies will be willing to do that. There's probably companies out there that are want to have referrals. Like they have a problem of too many customers and they don't know who to send them to. So if you can go to them and be like a really nice person, especially if you could show up at their door well dressed, with a logoed shirt on and be like, hey man, I really messed up on my marketing. We take really good care of our customers. If you guys have any overflow calls, if you could be willing to send them to me, that would be amazing. Like if somebody would have done that to me, because we had this problem. We had too many calls, too much, and we had overflow, but nobody to send them to. And if I could have had that option, I would have taken it all day. I would have sent that person hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of phone calls.
So do not discount that thing, because even when Ayla worked at Prospector and she would refer those calls out, that is still Prospector doing a good service. Because if I can't get on the schedule today, but you're like, try this guy, and then I get on the schedule with him and he's a good referral, in my head, Prospector still did me right? Yeah. They still did a good job. So there shouldn't ever be a competitive attitude when it comes to that type of thing, especially if you're in sort of the context in which we're talking, where you're desperate. And then really what I'm hearing said is that there is always something that you can do as the plumbing business owner
Always.
to go out and do something. Because I think there's a lot of people where they just get stuck and they say, I can't, there's nothing, everything's broken. And they forget that, no, just do what you did when you didn't have all these things.
Yeah.
And go, in your mind, regress to calling and door knocking and all that kind of stuff. Because at the end of the day, your responsibility is to get the work in the door. It isn't this weird ego thing.
It's not like you're truly going back to square one.
No.
You have all the knowledge that you built before. You know the mistakes that you made that got you there in the first place. And you're gonna put measures in place. But like back to Jared's like talking about the tenacity of I got to figure this out. Like those steps are sometimes things that people don't want to take out of pride. And I'm like, it's business. It's not a time.
Suck it up, buttercup.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to have a successful business, and this is my favorite thing about business, because it requires a certain person to be effective at business. And that's a certain person that everybody I talk to wants to be. Like, we as business owners want to be formidable in these spaces. And so when you come to this point where you're like, man, I don't know if I can do this, that is something telling you that you need to level up a skill or a mindset to go and do that, which you're totally capable of doing. And then once you get through to the other side, you have just become more powerful and more formidable within your own self, which in my mind is like business is sort of the route to self-discovery and self-betterment and self-empowerment. Business is just like a really raw way to do that. Like I always use the nerdy example of it's the modern day conquering the dragon, where I can't think of anything more except for maybe like, I don't know, being a soldier where you're like, okay, I'm putting everything on the line and I'm going out and I'm doing something very hard that's going to require more of me than anything I've ever done before. And it's a heroic act. And if it's done properly, you get to reap a heroic reward. And so, take courage and go out and do stuff you don't want to do. It's just part of being a business owner. And then when it gets back on step, you're like, okay, I'm never going to let that happen again. I'm going to go spend more on this. I'm going to go do this because that sucked. I never want to do that. And then you won't have to again.
I think that business is one of the best character building exercises anybody could ask for. Ethics, problem solving, critical thinking, being in business, even if it doesn't work out, you are still a better person at the end of the day.
Sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Okay. I had a third thing, but we'll make it another podcast.
Everybody stole Jared's fire.
Okay, well, thanks again for coming on, Tyler. Really appreciated that conversation. It was fun.
You're welcome. That was a fun one. I like these.
All right, thanks everybody. See you next time.
Okay, see ya.
Bye.
Hey guys, if you liked that episode and you want to see more content like that, I've picked out a special episode just for you. All you got to do is click right here. Go ahead and do it. Just click right there.